agenda, we have a presentation by Mr. Harrison and members of the Goldenberg group on the subject of the TIF.
Welcome, Mr. Harrison.
Thank you very much, Dr. Seinberg. My name is Tim Harrison. As I have to admit, I'm a developer from Staten Island, New York. Although, in defense, I will say both of my children were born in Harrisburg Hospital, and my wife and I lived in Harrisburg for 10 years until my wife was transferred to Staten Island, and I was transferred too. I want to introduce to you some people who are with me tonight. Jeremy Fogel, who will be sharing the presentation from the Goldenberg Group in Bell, Pennsylvania. Kevin Trapper in the second row, also from the Goldenberg Group. Amy Kaufman in the second row from Delta Development of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And Joe Cogden from Mullen and Lonergan Associates in Huntington Valley, Pennsylvania. I wanted to start with an update on the Hamilton Crossings project. The Hamilton Crossings project is a large retail project. I actually began work on the project in 2008, filed a preliminary plan involving a Target and a Lowe's in early 2009. Then, as all of us remember only too well, the economy slipped into recession. Lowe's terminated its new store development program, and the project was in severe jeopardy. I continued working on it with Lower McConchy Township, attempting to craft a project that would be acceptable to the township and at the same time financially viable. And in order to make the project work, the bottom line was it needed to be much larger and more densely developed than the township ordinances allow. Eventually, we came up with a plan that looked something like this. This is approximately 580,000 square feet on 62 acres. The anchor tenants are Costco, Target, ShopRite. There are various junior anchors, restaurants, and other small retailers that are part of the project. In February 2011, Lower McConchy Township granted a package of 28 zoning variances that were needed to accommodate a project of this kind of density. And actually, since that time, we've had to make substantial revisions to the plan to accommodate Costco, and more important, to accommodate some very severe geotechnical issues that we uncovered on the site. The project involves a total investment of over $120 million. It will employ more than 1,000 people. It will involve more than 400 construction jobs. Our projections are that the project will generate real estate taxes for the school district of somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 to $1.4 million per year, although I must caution that those are our projections. Ultimately, the projections will be done by, not by us, but by a TIF committee in consultation with the county assessor. However, we do believe our projections are conservative, make sense. The project is a higher end shopping center. It involves a degree of architecture, amenities, landscaping that are much more similar to the promenade shops in Saucon Valley than to any shopping centers in Lower McConchy Township. The project also involves some rather significant road improvements the most important of which is the construction of a service road along the Route 222 bypass from approximately this location west of Krocks Road to the intersection of Krocks Road, and then past the intersection of Krocks Road, maybe 2,000 linear feet in total. In effect, what this does is provide direct access to the project from eastbound traffic on the bypass, and also, in effect, adds a third through lane to the bypass, thereby increasing its capacity. The project also involves a regional stormwater detention facility that will handle flooding problems that occur today from a drainage area of more than 400 acres. What we discovered in extensive geotechnical studies that my partners at the Goldenberg Group commissioned and Costco commissioned earlier this year is very, very severe problems that, although you wouldn't know it walking by this site, really make it an industrial brownfield. This site beginning before the Civil War, was the site of an open pit iron mine. It's called Joseph Bastian's mine. And that mine operated on and off until the 1940s, a period of more than 70 years. There was also located on the site a facility which used a water source that was adjacent to the site to separate the iron ore, which was mined on the site, from the sediment in which it was embedded. And that sediment, once it was washed away from the iron ore, was just used to fill in mining holes. It wasn't compacted, and obviously not regulated. Our problem is we now have over 185,000 cubic yards of that sediment on the site, located approximately here. And to make that 185,000 cubic yards a little bit more comprehensible, that's 333,000 tons of material, or to put it another way, 50,000 dump truck loads. The material has no structural strength whatsoever. It's in a highly saturated state. It has the consistency of pancake batter, so that any weight that's put on the material causes it to expand horizontally. Anyway, and what our geotechnical reports, just to give you some idea of the scope of them, they're in this rather weighty volume. What our geotechnical reports have all recommended is that buildings be moved out of the mine wash be extracted, all 50,000 dump truck loads, 333,000 tons, extracted from the ground, mixed with cement or a stone, maybe 50-50, put back in the ground in 1 foot lifts once it's dried out and packed. And we've got depths of this stuff that exceed 24 feet. There was no provision in the pro forma for this kind of extraordinary remediation cost. And frankly, this project is not viable. Actually, this site, this 60-acre site, is now in the clean and green zone. It generates real estate tax of about $7,000 a year. And our belief, informed by these geotechnical reports, is that the site will forever remain in an undeveloped state without this kind of remediation. Absolutely nothing of any weight can that be built on this site. There's another problem that we have that's unique to this site, which is there is massive deposits of limestone, which geotechnical engineers call karst, K-A-R-S-T, really means limestone, that underlay this site. And 80 years of open pit mining, repeated explosions and disturbances involved with 80 years of open pit mining, have fractured 60 acres of karst to the point where it's impossible to build on it, even once the mine wash is remediated. And to make matters even more difficult, the mine wash itself, which is so saturated, has been dripping water slowly and incessantly onto the limestone for 80 years. When water interacts with limestone, it dissolves it. So we have a lattice of rock underneath the mine wash that won't support buildings here. Are there geotechnical solutions to this? Yes. I read in the Morning Call an article a couple weeks ago about similar problems associated with the hockey arena downtown, which had a single problem. They're using 1,600 micropiles to support that, at least according to the Morning Call, to support that structure. That's one remediation technique that's been recommended here. There are others as well, and we're sorting through that now. But suffice it to say, for present purposes, it's extraordinarily costly, and the project simply cannot be developed without this remediation, whether it's our project or any other project on this road. In addition, the transportation network that we're putting in here to support the project is extremely costly. It will benefit the project, but it will also benefit the community as well because of the additional capacity that we're adding to the road. Now I'm going to yield my time to Jeremy Vogel, who's a much more articulate, intelligent person than I am, to go through the TIF process that we'd like the board to consider. Thank you. Good evening.
As Tim outlined, I guess good evening, my name is Jeremy Vogel, Goldenberg Group. As Tim outlined, we basically have a kind of simple situation. We have a project that we think has a lot of merit. It is something that we do in terms of our real estate focus in building commercial shopping centers and try to do in-house with our own finances when possible. This particular site presents the problems that Tim outlined and creates a solution in terms of the types of funding that we can identify to try to bridge the financial gap that exists here. The tax increment financing structure is something that is often misunderstood. It's not something that is applicable in all circumstances, and we're here tonight just to be informative and ask the board to consider the concept. We have some information to share with you about what it is, and hope that we can come back again and talk about it in more detail. But in general, when we look at a tax increment financing, the main test is actually called a but-for test. And you are supposed to look at a piece of property and identify whether you think it can develop on its own, or will it only develop but for some financing. This property has been in an extremely developing township for a long time. It's in the center of its commercial core. It's currently owned by the Archdiocese of Allentown, and as Tim indicated, it only throws off about $7,000 in taxes a year. Based on the physical limitations that we've identified, it's our position that the reason it hasn't been developed is because of these issues. People have slowly investigated this property over the years for different uses and have slowly come to the conclusion, probably not after doing as much of an extensive investigation as we have, but they clearly understood that there's a major barrier to developing this property physically, and it's prevented anything of any substance from happening here. And but for us coming up with some solutions on how to bridge this gap, this project will continue to throw off $7,000 a year. And I think that it's important for the public to understand that, because as the public will say, and as was pointed out, I think nicely by the gentleman to begin with his beginning discussion about the project, If the project would easily happen otherwise, sometimes it's not appropriate to have the public get involved in the financing of a project. This is a case where we feel otherwise. We think it's extremely appropriate. We think that the taxes that will be used if the groups that have been involved agree only come from the project and from no other source. They only come from the real estate tax that we generate with the project that we created. So the increment and TIF reference, whatever the actual assessment is only a portion of those new taxes that would be used for the project. And the township, the town school, and the county, in this case the township doesn't have a local tax, so the school and the county would each have a significant increase in their share of the taxes from the project than they would otherwise. So there is a win-win for everyone to achieve here if the project is able to move forward. And if not, obviously, what would happen is our project would not be able to move forward, and the tenants that are looking to go here would just go elsewhere. We believe at this point the tenants that we're talking to would move far afield, and obviously everybody locally would suffer that loss to the extent that that was important to them. There's a number of sources that we're trying to receive these monies from. We're not relying locally on the school district. We have made a number of applications for funding from the state. We are working with the governor's office for some sources for some of the road improvements and some of the other issues that we have on the project. And we are looking only to ask the county and the township and the school to work with us to bridge whatever gap is left at the end of that effort. It's hard to know exactly what the gap will be. We think we've started to define that, but the purpose of our step on the TIF is to ask for a committee. That's the first step in the process. And if the school would be so willing, a board would be established, a TIF committee, which would involve folks from all of those different groups, and also including the Lehigh County Industrial Development Authority, and we would work together to try to identify exactly what the gap is, what a reasonable projection of the revenue from the project would be, how a bond could be floated by the Industrial Development Authority to help finance some of the construction costs, and the exact details of how that works out. The TIF committee's job is to work through that process and come up with a recommendation. They then come back to all the boards with that recommendation so that the folks on the boards can have a chance to understand exactly what they're looking at and decide whether they think is appropriate. So really what we're asking for is for this board just to be aware that the process is something we'd like them to consider. We'd like you to have some information that I want to talk about, and then we'll come back again. One of the handouts we have for you is an outline that was prepared by the solicitor of the LCIDA, John Lucius. It's kind of a how-to for TIFs, and it's something that he drafted that we found is very helpful in trying to understand the TIF. And again, I don't believe the school district has been involved with a TIF, so please don't take this as a condescending discussion. It's really just trying to give information for something that, if you haven't been involved in, can be quite confusing. We've also brought with us an outline of some of the TIFs that have been put into place inside the Commonwealth. It is a vehicle that's been involved since the 70s. It's something that is used routinely throughout the country. Pennsylvania does it quite often. There's been a number of TIFs that have been used in this area. And so we brought some examples of TIFs that have been put into place, how they've been used, and then how the different governing bodies have participated. And then lastly, we brought with us a chart that kind of explains the process so that you can become familiar with the different legislative steps that need to be taken before a TIF can take effect. So again, the first step is to have a TIF committee established to look at the project as a whole and determine whether they think that that TIF is even worth discussing, and then under what terms that would happen. So today, again, is really just an informational meeting. The project itself, we think, is excellent from a retail perspective. We think that the tenants that are looking to come to this project are among the best in the types of tenants that we deal with. So as far as an asset, we would look at it to be first class and something that most communities would be very excited about having in terms of having a tax base that would be augmented by national credit retailers as well as some local different retailers. So the community, we believe, would be looking at having a project that would have some new retailers that are not here, some new restaurants and other uses that many people will find that they're looking to have. We think that it will generate a number of taxes and benefits like jobs and taxes beyond just the real estate taxes that would go to the benefit of all parties involved. And then of the TIF itself, the increment that would be generated will be significantly more than the amount that we would ask be involved in helping to finance the construction costs, so that there's an economic win as well. It's a general summary. Any questions, please?
Well, let's start off by finding out if the board wishes to ask anything
just want to restate in my own words to make sure that I have the understanding. The parcel in question currently generates about $7,000 in real estate taxes for the school district. We're proposing to develop the parcel, and the financial assistance you are looking to receive is really from the taxes the parcel itself would generate. So if the TIF financing goes through, the school district that currently receives $7,000 for that parcel would have the opportunity to receive probably several $100,000 more from the same parcel.
That's correct. That's correct.
And that, if I could expand on that, what I left out is too much detail. I don't know how much detail we get in tonight, but ultimately what happened, if everybody was willing to move forward, is the Lehigh County Industrial Development Authority would spearhead the process. These kind of projects go through an authority like that. So the TIF committee hopefully would include members from that group, the school, the township, and the county, and ourselves. And ultimately would identify exactly how many taxes, based on work with the assessor's office, would be created from the project. And again, just as you said, only a portion of the taxes from this project could be used. So we would then ultimately ask the county authority to float bonds that would take payment from a portion of the real estate taxes to maintain those bonds. And then the present value of those would be provided for construction costs. The school district would have no liability whatsoever. The school district would have no responsibility whatsoever. And at this step, all we're asking the school to do is join a committee. If the school, actually tonight, frankly, we're not even asking for that. We will be coming back to formally ask that. We're not asking that tonight, but when we do, the school will have no responsibility if they join the committee and decide that they don't like the idea, or if the committee comes to conclusions that the school can't support. There is, at any time, the school has the ability to opt out and not be involved about any further responsibility. If the project does move forward to completion, and we do ultimately have the blessing of a TIF committee, who then gets votes from the boards of all the municipality and entities that are involved, at that point, if bonds are floated, the school would still have no responsibility. All the school's doing, ultimately, if they agree, is allowing a portion of the taxes that would have been generated, that will be generated, to go towards the bonds.
New taxes.
New taxes. So yes.
So no existing taxpayers are being affected by this. No taxes from any current Penn taxpayers are going to that project.
That's correct. And if anything, certainly we would propose that the taxes to the general population would increase significantly from the project, even with the TIF. And without the TIF, but for the TIF, they will not.
Let's see, Ms. Natchez.
Yes, so do I understand correctly then that the authority is the one that's paying off the bonds?
What would happen is if bonds are floated for the project and create construction funding, which is what we would ultimately look for, there would be an annual payment that would need to service those bonds, and they would come from real estate taxes. So the tenants that would operate the shopping center would pay their taxes, whatever they would be, whether there was a TIF or not. But then the assessor's office or the tax collector, frankly, would collect those taxes, and at that point, no, whatever the percentages of that revenue that's supposed to go towards the bonds would then be paid to the bonds, and the rest would then go to the school and county in this case, as they would otherwise. So the tenants pay the same amount they would always have paid, and the only person that would pay the bond would be the documents, what everyone would agree to, would spell out exactly how those taxes get applied between the bonds and the taxing authorities. Again, those details would be reviewed in detail by all the folks that would be involved.
Okay, and who backs up those bonds?
Well, there's a number of ways to do that. The interest rate of the bonds will significantly be affected by who backs them up. They could simply be backed up by the tenants. I mean, the anchor tenants that will be the majority of the income taxes property are first-class national credit tenants. In addition, we've met with the state. There's a state TIF guarantee program that the Commonwealth has that encourages these programs. And we've met with the folks at the state about that, and there is a TIF guarantee program that could be applicable to the project. In addition, there could be other guarantees that are provided. There's a number of ways to guarantee the bonds. The goal would be to make them as saleable, frankly, as possible, because then the lower interest rate would allow for additional proceeds. But again, regardless of who backs them up, ultimately, the TIF, whoever buys those bonds is buying whatever the bond is that is packaged up, and then at that point, they get an interest rate return on their money for the risk that they're taking. And it's our goal to try to minimize that risk, which would obviously lower the interest rate. I hope I answered your question.
Mr. Fokker?
Similar questions. I was just concerned if the project's successful, I understand the financing. What if the project fails and the tenants don't do well? Who pays off the bonds? I guess it's whoever stacked the bonds.
Yes. Now, keep in mind, if when the project's built, if one of the stores decides to close, obviously real estate taxes are still assessed. So one of the things that makes us comfortable even considering this type of a structure is that the real estate taxes are obligated to be paid by Target, Costco, Wakefern, which is ShopRite's parent company, which are all they're all credit companies. So the bond folks that would put this together ultimately will look at the credit of the people that are backing up the real estate tax payments and then assess a risk on the bond, just like it's school floated bond, frankly. And then it'll be offered for sale in the public market, and the market will determine the rate.
The important point, though, is even if for some reason the Target store weren't successful, or the Costco weren't successful, and the stores closed, Target and Costco will own their facilities, and they will be responsible for paying real estate taxes, whether the stores are open or not. In order for them to default on paying those taxes, the entire company of Target and Costco would have to liquidate. And we feel that that's extremely unlikely.
Or they have to sell it if they sold the property.
If they sold it, someone would still be obligated to pay real estate taxes.
Well, on first round here, I'll ask a question that's corollary to that. The usual thing when we've seen happening in the recession is these industrial concerns or large retail concerns close up shops, say, or reduce their operations, and then they go in and ask for a assessment appeal to lower the assessment so their taxes go down. What happens in the case where they successfully get one of those appeals?
In the structure of the document will be a requirement that they agree that they will not appeal their taxes below a number that would make the bond payments. So those are some of the details that get worked into this, but that's what happens generally is they agree that because this money is being used for the project, they have to Target, Costco, and the other folks who are part of the project, and us would have to agree that we would forego any rights of appeal of a tax so that we wouldn't create that issue.
Ms. Natchez, did you have your hand up again?
Yes, I had, because it's a government money, does the prevailing wage need to be paid?
It does.
So the cost of the whole project, or just on the part, I guess you couldn't really split it out, it's the whole project then?
No, you can, the part that the monies go to would certainly need to be used with the prevailing wage. And so, again, it would depend what the funds are specifically used for, but for example, if they were used for traffic improvements, then those improvements would need to be installed using prevailing wages.
With a separate contract just for those improvements.
Mr. Armstrong?
So the question that I have, you said there's a percentage that's fixed by the different taxing bodies. They say, okay, a certain percentage of the new taxes will go towards servicing the bond payments. What if the percentage of the taxes ends up generating a surplus above and beyond what's needed to service those bonds?
Then those tax revenues go to the authority. If this thing moves forward, if the project moves forward and ultimately the TIF committee establishes the contribution of the percentage of taxes from the school and from the county that would go towards the bond, that would be it. So in the future, if taxes are increased, if the millage rate's increased, if additional retail is built on the property, that creates an additional revenue source for real estate taxes, all of that goes to the taxing authorities as they would normally. Only the amount that the TIF committee and then the boards approve goes to the bonds, and everything else thereafter would go then to the tax authorities.
Right, well, let's say, let's just use some round numbers, those are easy. Let's say it's $1 million in incremental tax income, and 20% is the number that's agreed by all the bodies. So 22% would be $200,000. What if the actual bond payments are $180,000? What happens to that extra $20,000? Is that returned to the taxing authorities?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Only the amount that's in the surface of the bond. And what will happen actually in practice, if we move forward, would be that it'll be open until those details are spelled out. Jared, please.
Sorry.
Basically, the bank is trustee for the bonds, hold that extra money, and if it fills up enough, the bonds will be repaid before the 3-year term fills up. So if there's more money coming in, we held prepaid debt ahead of time, and the TIF will end as soon as we have enough money to pay off the debt.
But ultimately, only the money that is needed to service the bonds over whatever term is agreed upon is allowed to be taken from the real estate taxes, and everything thereafter goes to the tax authorities as they would normally in a normal splitting of those taxes.
Now, is there any current estimate of the amount of the bonds that would, some rough figure of bonds that would be needed to complete this project?
That's a tough question. I guess the reality is that the answer is dependent on the other sources of revenue that we have. We've applied for various grants and other sources of funds. So there's a gap that we've identified, but we don't think that the gap that's going to be requested of the TIF committee is anywhere close to that total number. What we talked about in terms of the dollar amount that we think is at risk here is about $14.5 million. Of that amount, we think less than half is something that we're going to ask the TIF committee to consider. And hopefully, as we hear back from the other grants and the other applications we've made, the number will continue to dwindle. The goal is for the TIF to be the last piece of the puzzle, so that to the extent we're extremely successful in achieving other funds, the TIF would shrink and be only needed to fill the gap that's left. And the timing of it is such that we believe by the time the folks on the TIF committee are established and the TIF committee meets, it's going to be a number of months. During that time, we'll have established more concrete numbers on our side so that that TIF committee will have actual dollars to talk about, and hopefully that gap has shrunk significantly. We generally try to work with conservative numbers and make it larger so that ultimately everyone's happy that it's less than we thought.
So you're currently estimating between $7 and $14 million in rough terms is the range we're looking at.
I think 14 has the total. I think that the amount that we think we need to get from the TIF is less than.
Okay. Are there other questions for the presenters on this floor?
We're not familiar with your company here. Could you briefly describe some of the shopping centers you have developed and currently manage?
Sure. Tim's firm has done, and many as well. Goldberg Group has been building primarily shopping centers for about 25 years. We're based in Bluebell, Pennsylvania. We've developed about 6 million square feet of retail, and our clients are generally Target, Costco, Walmart, and the boxes that you're familiar with. We are proud that most of our shopping centers are in local community areas. We work hard with all the stakeholders when we build a project like this. You can imagine the amount of people that want to have input on something this significant and this influential in a neighborhood. So we work with township, with the county, with the school districts, with the residents to try to identify what it is that everyone's looking for, and ultimately end up with something that is an asset that we feel most people are proud of. We are recently, probably 5-7 years, been working on other types of projects. We've done some residential projects, we've done a condo project. We're about to break ground on a large student housing project at Temple University in actually the next 2 weeks. But primarily what we focus on is shopping center development, like the project we have here today. And in 25 years, we have built 11 of these centers, 11 or 12 of these centers. The most recent and close to here is in Berks County. We built in Exeter Township a shopping center called Exeter Commons that's anchored by Target and Lowe's. And in Hamburg, PA, we did something called Tilden Ridge, which is a Walmart and Lowe's. And generally, I think you'll find, I guess closest to here really is Exeter Township. You'll find that if you speak to the folks in Exeter Township, we're confident they'll tell you that the things that we said that we would do, the promises and commitments we've made, we honor all of them. It's extremely important to us that as we move on to the next project, that those folks can check back and see that we've done what we said we would. So I believe that we'd ask you, we'll give you a list of references that we'd love you to check out, because I believe you'll feel comfortable that what we tell you we can deliver, we will.
I think we look forward to that list of references.
Thank you.
Mr. Bonner, one more question. Do you have something else you want to say?
I would simply say I would hope that my record as a developer is almost as good as the Goldberg Group.
Mr. Bonner.
Are there restrictions on what the money borrowed or the bond money can be spent on? Is it, for example, restricted to only the remediation efforts, or that just have to be part of it?
The TIF committee can establish it, and generally nobody's looking for us to do the private portions of the project with those funds. So it's generally for infrastructure, remediation, things of that nature. I don't believe it's restricted. Cabela's in Hamburg did a significant TIF 10, 12 years ago, and I believe some of those funds went to the building itself. That's not our goal. We would not look for the funds to do those types of things. It's really for the public improvements, the infrastructure, and things of that nature.
Mr. Earnshaw.
So I guess when this does come back to the board for development, the question will be faced is whether we think that there could be some other development on the property, maybe lesser in scope, that uses a different part of the project that could generate equivalent or superior revenues without our involvement in the TIF, and how likely that is to happen and how soon it would happen. I guess that's, so it's more of an opportunity cost that we have to consider, rather than there's essentially no tax dollars currently at risk. It's not like we're tearing down existing facilities that are generating a certain amount of tax revenues that we would lose should the project then fail after the demolition. So I think that I'm looking forward very much to hearing what final proposals do come forward.
Sure, and I would offer that the Diocese of Allentown would likely use a developer in a project of any scale, regardless who's going to come to the conclusion physically of what we said. I'm sure you could build something on that property. What we found, and not having too much detail, but what we found is when we identified the issue, the depths and the characteristics of what's there, the first thing we did was relocate the buildings. That's actually something that took a number of months for us to work out how to relocate the buildings. But even doing that, even the parking lot can't be above that. So we're talking about something with relatively no weight, 8 inches of stone in the asphalt. Even that required remediation of the mine wash below it. And there's more extensive remediation needed for the buildings if you move it out of the mine wash area. But even in the mine wash area itself, it was something that needed. So it would be difficult to do enough sensitivity analysis to prove that nothing could be built, but certainly anything of any substance that's going to have any weight to it, we would be comfortable in having experts up here who could explain to you the results of the data that we have and why that would be very limited. And frankly, a number of people have looked at doing just that on the property, and as you see today, this is the way it does.
Any other questions? Thank you very much for your
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I have a couple more handouts which I'll pass around.
Why don't you give them to